thrilled to welcome everyone to UCLA's first Rare Disease Day event. I'm very excited to be here with all of you today and will be serving as the moderator and the MC for the event for the next 2 hours. By way of background, I'm the Deputy Director for the UCLA Institute for Precision Health, and I'm also part of our neurology faculty here in our UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine. I've been in academic medicine most of my career, but also spent over a decade with a nonprofit science and advocacy organization, Autism Speaks, which many of you may know, developing and overseeing a clinical research portfolio in the field of autism and neurodevelopmental disorders. So I've spent my career doing grassroots work with our communities, as well as both basic and clinical research in academic institutions. The California Center for Rare Diseases is very near and dear to my heart, and my colleagues and I are really excited to connect with you today, since these virtual events give us the opportunity to really bring together people, not just from Los Angeles or from Southern California, but from the state of California and beyond. Our goal today is to learn a lot, share experiences, and have some fun. In fact, if you let us know where you're from and you type it in the Q&A box, I can share it with the group. Let's see. We have folks from Oklahoma, from Los Angeles, Bakersfield, California, New Jersey, El Paso, Texas, New Hampshire, Nashville, Tennessee, Tampa, Florida, Apple Valley, California, Alabama, New York, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts, my alma mater I went to, and did my undergrad at Tufts there. Let's see, Florida, Orange County, Seattle. So you can see that we are, we're drawing folks nationwide, and we're thrilled, really excited and thrilled to have you. A few housekeeping announcements as we get started. First, this meeting is being recorded. Second, please submit your questions in the Q&A function below. We're going to be monitoring the live questions throughout. Please know that we can't give specific medical advice about your condition, so just keep that in mind. We don't want folks to be disappointed. Some of you submitted questions when you registered, and we're going to get to those questions later in the program, since I know that's one of the really exciting parts of the programs. I know that many folks are really interested in that part. So just bear with us, and we will do our best to answer all the questions as best we can. As you may know, the official International Rare Disease Day is the last day in February. The day is organized and promoted through the National Organization for Rare Disorders, or NORD, and we're very lucky to have Earl Cole from NORD here with us today, and you'll hear from him in just a little bit. We have a terrific program for you today, starting with a video which gives an overview of the California Center for Rare Diseases at UCLA. We're going to have a welcome from one of my dearest friends and colleagues, Dr. Daniel Gashwin, who's a Senior Associate Dean and Associate Vice Chancellor for Precision Health here at UCLA, as well as a faculty member in the Department of Neurology, Psychiatry, and Human Genetics. Then it's going to be, so Dr. Gashwin's going to be followed by a very special speaker, Victoria Jackson, who's the founder of a cosmetics and infomercial empire, Victoria Jackson Cosmetics, and also the founder of the Guthrie Jackson Charitable Foundation. It's going to be a real treat to hear and talk with her. Next up, will be our UCLA expert faculty panel, beginning with a fantastic video which features some amazing UCLA patient stories. Then we will have two experts on advocacy and community building, Earl Cole from NORD and also Cheyenne Floyd. And they're going to share their personal stories, as well as give us some insights into how to make a difference for your community. And finally, last but not least, we will get to questions submitted in advance. and hopefully have time to take some live questions as well. So I hope everyone's really excited about our program. That's it for the introduction, and I really want to get started. So first, we're going to watch a short video that introduces the California Center for Rare Diseases, and hope you just sit back and enjoy.
The Center for Rare Diseases is a multidisciplinary center that leverages the expertise of our clinicians here at UCLA and also the research and innovation that's been going on at UCLA for decades in the field of genomic medicine. There are so many children in the United States, as well as adults, that suffer from undiagnosed rare diseases. And for parents and also for individuals, the diagnostic odyssey can last for over a decade. So we want to create a safe place where patients can come and receive the care that they need.
A month ago, I gave a diagnosis to a family. He has been our patient for 17 years. No diagnosis, 17 years. When I gave it to the mother, she was crying the whole time and said that, do you know how many nights I did not sleep thinking what went wrong? What did I do? What is causing this? And you have an answer. And true that there is no treatment for it right now, but that's the hope. That's exactly the hope. Once you have a label, that's where things start.
Advances in genomics now allow us to diagnose people who 10 years ago were undiagnosable. And UCLA was one of the first places in the world to use what's called whole exome sequencing, or sequencing the genome, and therapies based on the specific genetics of that patient are currently being developed and will be implemented over the next 5 to 10 years. So part of this is discovering new diseases that weren't even known before. And when that happens, people start websites, and then they find that there are 30 other patients around the world with that mutation, and they can meet each other.
That mother has started a Facebook page. It's gathering other families, trying to fundraise for research. What is more rewarding than that, you know?
For me, trying to make an impact in rare diseases, you want to be where the kids are. There's a lot of kids in LA. And you also want to be in an environment that values and can perform basic science research, but can also translate it right into clinic. And UCLA has all that, so it's the right place to be to do this.
At the end of the day, this is about giving patients hope.
Wow, every time I see this video, I think about how humbled I am to be able to work with such incredible colleagues who also have that same optimism and hope for the future. And now it's my pleasure to introduce again my dearest friend and colleague, Dr. Dan Gashwin, who is one of the stars of the previous video. Who's going to share more of the remarkable history of rare disease research and treatment here at UCLA.
Thank you, Clara, and thank you all for being here for our inaugural Rare Disease Day event. We hope that you come away today inspired and hopeful for a bright future and share our optimism. You're going to hear some heroic patient stories today, and you're going to hear from my amazing colleagues, and they are truly amazing. They're definitely some of the best physicians in the US and the world across a broad range of rare disorders. What makes UCLA unique is the fact that many of its clinicians are also performing leading research in the disorders they treat. This allows us to ensure that we provide state-of-the-art care to our patients based on the most up-to-date knowledge, and to participate in the most advanced clinical trials. The California Center for Rare Diseases is an important pillar of our Institute for Precision Health. It's one of the key aspects of this. And with its formation, we have aligned and organized all of our strengths in rare disease work around this center. It's called the California Center because UCLA has been the California pioneer, as well as the national pioneer, on the forefront of precision medicine for decades, developing and incorporating new technologies for diagnosis and treatment. UCLA was one of the first institutions in the world to use whole exome sequencing in a clinical setting to diagnose patients with rare disease. We're unique in the world to use RNA sequencing in diagnosis and treatment of rare disorders. We're also a clinical site of the Undiagnosed Disease Network, and perhaps some of you have learned about our expertise in that way. Our faculty include people like Don Cohen, who has pioneered techniques to treat the severest forms of rare disease called SCID. Many of you will be familiar with the boy in the bubble, severe combined immunodeficiency. And Dr. Stan Nelson, who is one of the stars today, who has been an innovator in Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. As many of you here today likely know, the Center for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is a model that we would like to replicate for many other diseases. We have many others, Deb Krakow in skeletal disorders, Manish Bude in immunology and infectious disease, and our own work in autism, where hundreds of genes have now been identified, providing new hope for therapeutics. Other work by the faculty panelists you will hear from today are a testament to UCLA's passion in caring for the most difficult health challenges. We deeply care for our patients. Together, we've been able to make what I see as progress in health and care of those with rare disease, from diagnosis to treatment. Every step in this path requires our partnership, a partnership with our patients, which is essential.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gashwin. It is always really great to hear about the breadth and depth of rare disease research here at UCLA. And it is one of the things that drew me to UCLA as a place where I would like to retire from. Now it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce our featured guest of the afternoon, Ms. Victoria Jackson. And every time I hear her name, it just makes me smile because I'm just in awe of individuals like Miss Jackson. And many of you may know her from her cosmetic empire, as I mentioned earlier, Victoria Jackson Cosmetics. She truly revolutionized the beauty industry with her no makeup, pioneering a new approach to sales by marketing her cosmetics on TV, building a powerhouse company with over 600 products and billions of dollars in sales. But in 2008, her life was changed with the news that her daughter had 4 years to live. And many of you can relate to that experience. Victoria's daughter was diagnosed with a very rare and devastating autoimmune disease, neuromyelitis optica, also known as NMO. When she learned how little was known about NMO, she and her husband, Bill Guthey, he's an infomercial giant, Guthey Renker, they immediately applied their business acumen to start the Guthey Jackson Charitable Foundation, which was focused on curing NMO. And I know this from my work in advocacy in autism, that there is this just singular vision and passion and focus to get to the root of the problem. Victoria has led the work of the foundation to achieve quantum progress at record speed, and it really has been transformative. The foundation itself has had remarkable success, completing 4 international clinical trials in just 5 years. And in 2019, 3 therapeutics received FDA approval for NMO. In 2017, Victoria was inducted by Gloria Steinem into the National Women's Hall of Fame. And in 2018, she was honored with the 2018 Pontifical Key Advocacy Award at Unite to Cure, which was the 4th International Vatican Conference for her visionary approach and transformative impact in advancing human understanding and funding for NMO and autoimmune related diseases. Victoria has produced documentaries, written 4 books. She sits on the boards of LACMA, UCLA Health, and Time's Up. And honestly, I just don't know. She's a force of nature. I don't know when she sleeps, if at all. And she manages to look terrific. 2 other things to know about Victoria. She taught an extension course at UCLA for 10 years on looking better and feeling better, and her class was full every quarter. And today, her daughter, Allie, is a student at UCLA Law. And that truly is a success. Victoria, we're so looking forward to hearing your story and how the research into one rare autoimmune disease can unlock the door to solving even more autoimmune and rare diseases.
Oh,
So I'm going to pass the baton to you.
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Clara. It has been quite the journey, and thank you for saying all the wonderful things. UCLA has played an incredible part in my life, and I really think about it now as kind of before Allie's diagnosis, UCLA, and really my life since Allie's diagnosis. And for those of you out there, thank you so much for joining. And, we think about this might be, whether it's Rare Disease Day or month, for all of us, patients and parents and caregivers and loved ones, it's always, when we have had that diagnosis, it's always rare disease for us. So my heart goes out to you. I want to be able to tell my story, and really it's all about seeing how what I've done, or we all have our stories, how I can help you in moving forward, which is a really difficult journey. And I can tell you, mine started really with my daughter. We were going out, we were driving in the car, and she started to say she had an eyeball headache and that she just was starting to lose some vision. And really up until that point, she's 14 years old. We've never had any issues. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe she has an eye infection, and, we'll go to the eye doctor and, get some drops, and that'll be that. And we basically go to the eye doctor and find out that she has an optic neuritis, and it requires more looking into. I am then sent to a neuro ophthalmologist who decides that now he needs to do some more testing, because why does this young woman, 13 years old, really young girl, have this condition? And now I find myself at UCLA seeing a neurologist who, wants to do more extensive testing, but does a series of blood tests and checks boxes on his little chart that he had never checked before. And I remember at the time saying to him, "Oh, what's this?" And he said, "Oh, we're going to be checking for something called neuromyelitis optica, but I'm sure she's not going to have that." And something about that would be very bad. And, long story short, UCLA was amazing in really giving us our first diagnosis of NMO. And it was at that point that said, well, I think because there was so little known, said you might want to go now to the Mayo Clinic. And I think they're doing some research there, or they're just getting started. And there's a doctor there named Dr. Brian Weinshanker. And so basically through all of this, Allie really didn't want to know what this diagnosis was. She really wanted to sort of go, Mom, I know you're going to figure this out. I just going to keep going to school and, doing my thing, which has kind of really been a theme for Allie. And I think for so many people, that positive mindset has been really run the course of, here we are 14 years later. But we went on to the Mayo Clinic and did a series of tests, and it was confirmed at that time. The doctor told me probably within the next few months that Allie would be starting to experience some forms of paralysis, losing, ability to, possibly walk or see or go to the bathroom or all these awful things. And I was like, wow, but there's just something with her eyes. And, it's where you kind of start off doing that magical thinking, like, well, maybe he's wrong. Maybe they have the diagnosis wrong. This isn't really happening. And one of the doctors, before we even got to Mayo Clinic, said, you probably have 4 years with her. So you might just, enjoy your time. And for me at that moment, I had had a very successful, career in the beauty industry. As we talked about, I taught a class there at UCLA, extension every quarter, and it was completely a different life. So that was all about beauty products and, makeup and looking better and feeling better. And now all of a sudden, I'm having to transition from mascara, as I call it, to medicine. And I'd written 2 beauty books, and that was my life. But as you know, when you get something like this happens in your life, you're in a new life. And my new life was now dedicated to finding a cure for my daughter and for all the people that had this unknown condition. And so basically, as I say, I shut the book on mascara. I opened the book on medicine in my mind. And I also have to say, I never graduated high school, and I hadn't, due to some early experiences in my life that prevented that. And I didn't go to college. So I'm thinking, oh, well, this is great. I make lip gloss and cosmetics. Sure, I can cure an autoimmune disease. But I was determined, and I went to Stanford, and I met with a group of scientists and researchers at the time that were just to help inform me about everything from autoimmune disease and molecular medicine, and started to get people that would be interested in going on this journey with me. And they were working on things like MS and different autoimmune disease, but it was still so limited what was known about NMO. Even if you Googled it, there was very few things, and I hadn't met any patients yet at this point. So it was very much a lonely journey. And I really want to say, as all this is going on, Allie did have some attacks. Things were getting worse. So there was the part of me as a mom, always like mom on a mission, but then there was mom, me, kind of curled up, in the bathroom crying and really not knowing where any of this was going to go. I feel for those of you that are out there that are going through it, but yet you need to still advocate for yourself. You still need to be proactive. And as I did that, and I started to build really this coalition of doctors and researchers and scientists, because my mind really said, I don't know how I'm going to cure this, but I know there's a lot of really smart people. And what I needed to do was get to these experts, to get to their really brain trust through a thread of humanity, like seeing me as a mom who didn't want to own their intellectual properties, who really just wanted to be there, support them, but at the same time, build something that was very different from what I heard, which was unique to the medical industry, was that people didn't share information. They didn't report together. And I said, well, that's not going to work. And thank goodness my husband, who's amazing, his business allowed us to really fund this, research worldwide. And so over time, 32 countries have come together now with 200 researchers and scientists all having to share and work together. And along the way, we realized we can't just do this with amazing researchers and scientists. We have to, as well, I learned you have to build a blood bank so that people have the samples to work with. And that was something that was, well, okay, how can I bring some of my old life into this as well? I remember starting out bringing patients together, and we would do, blush for blood. I was always thinking creatively of how do I build all the tools, the resources and things to get us where we need to go. But yet knowing you have to bring the patients together, because patients really are the cure ultimately. Bringing that support system, because we never had anybody to see or talk to in the early days of NMO. So really building a community together of support. And then that thinking of, if you build it, they will come. That I needed pharmaceutical companies and people to be engaged enough to want to find a solution. And ultimately, we found out, which early days of them saying there was probably 20,000 people worldwide that have NMO, is really closer to 500,000 people worldwide as my work has gone on, because so many people were misdiagnosed. So there were so many levels dealing with advocacy and education, and, just as a mom dealing with just the reality of my child having this. And for those of you that are interested, Allie and I together in the early days, because it really wasn't until she was about 16 that she found out what she had, because she, again, didn't want to know. And we wrote a book together called Saving Each Other. And our book was written separately. We wrote separately. And it wasn't until I read the book, actually, that I knew how she was going through those early days of what she was navigating. And it's a very personal story, and if that's helpful. And I want to also say, as I've been going through this, people said, Victoria, do you realize that the work you're doing and the model you're creating here, which I never really planned on doing, it was just put my head down and do the work, is going to make a difference for other diseases, other rare diseases, to show a way in which to work. And I thought, well, that's great. And along the way, we charted that course with some amazing people that I work with. Dr. Michael Yeaman, who is there at UCLA, Harbor UCLA, who is the head of my scientific team, and could not do that without him. And he's really helped. We wrote a book called The Power of Rare, a blueprint for medical revolution. So amazing people at UCLA. I'm going to continue on to, my story could go on, and I want to be so sensitive to the time. But UCLA has been incredible. I'm going to continue to work with UCLA on some programs coming up with Stan Nelson and team, and Clara and Dan, and the people that I'm meeting, because they're very compassionate and they're very dedicated to moving the field forward. And I'm glad to be able to do that. And I hope sharing a little bit of my story helps all of you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I can only say that I have such admiration for the work that you do, having worked with some moms in the autism space who also, they've taken their business hats and their career mom hats, and they have completely also used those skills to become scientists, to become patient navigators, to become care champions, and to be moms. And women are incredibly resilient, and I applaud you. I bet sometimes you think, you reflect on that and think, I wouldn't have done it any other way.
That's true. And if I could just say one other thing about rare, just for people to be thinking about as they go through this day and your time, everything is rare before we know it. And it's really about really finding the strength that you can from the rare, from what you've been served up, because there is power in that. And I want to just have people be encouraged by that. They're not alone.
Thank you so much. And what we're hoping that, I know that there are some questions for Ms. Jackson, and we're going to take them at the end for our Q&A.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your inspirational story of hope. It's a pleasure, and a big thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you.
So Victoria's story and these incredible experiences here at UCLA really help bring hope to patients and families. I have been working with UCLA for even when I wasn't here formally at UCLA, and it's always been a source of inspiration. Next, I'm really excited to introduce my colleagues and our expert panel of physicians and professors for the next part of the program. But before we do that, we'd love to hear directly from our patients. And we've put together a moving video from some of our wonderful patients who were kind and brave enough to share their stories with us. So sit back, relax, perhaps enjoy some popcorn, courtesy of you, and enjoy.
My name is Peyton Marquez, and I have Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
I'm Angela Morrow.
And hi, I'm Todd Morrow, and we have Ryan,
who is 10 years old and has Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
My name is Seda Falenko. I am Marco Falenko's mother. Marco is a now 9-year-old boy diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
It's a rare muscle disease that affects mostly kids, boys, and it makes their muscles very weak. In their teens, most of them are in a wheelchair.
My name is Stephanie Winton, and my son is Dalton Winton. He's 2 years old, and at 10 months old, he was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. Many people with spinal muscular atrophy are completely disabled with no body movement. They have to have feeding tubes and trachs to breathe.
My name is Angelica Rojas, and I was born with a rare genetic disease called adenosine deaminase deficiency. I was born without an enzyme in my body that helps support a healthy immune system.
My name is Erica, and I'm the mother of a TBCK warrior. That is Ava's official diagnosis. It was a really long journey. Ava is almost 7 years old, and we found out her diagnosis when she was 5.
We went to a number of other centers from Texas to San Diego, also San Antonio.
We have been to a number of locations for evaluation for Ryan, both on the West Coast and Midwest, but we just weren't satisfied with the direct care that we were getting with Ryan.
We just felt that something else was not right. It was that kind of kept us looking and not just taking the word of the physicians. Me being a physician, being in that position where I know when something's not right, something's not right.
I was diagnosed at Children's Hospital Los Angeles when I was 5 years old. Transitioning from pediatric care to adult care has been difficult. Once I turned 21, a CHLA kind of was like, time for you to grow up.
I joined several groups based on Ava's symptoms, and I would peruse the feed and chat with some of the parents. I did see a post about the Undiagnosed Disease Network, put in an application, got all of Ava's medical documents, wrote letters, and everything that was required for the process. And we were accepted into the program. That was probably the second most exciting day to actually getting her diagnosis.
When you first get the diagnosis, it's a hard pill to swallow. There's a grieving process.
The day that Ryan was diagnosed and Angie and I sat out in front of a fountain outside of a hospital crying for a while, it hits you hard. You've got to go through that process.
People handle it different ways, and we chose to handle it in a way that, you know what, we're going to fight every chance we get. We're going to try to make a difference and try to help as many people as we can.
It has been like finding a missing piece of your family. For so long, we were trying to fit Ava in a piece of a puzzle that she really didn't fit.
With my condition, I don't look sick to many people. So to the health system, I wasn't sick enough for Medi-Cal. I wasn't sick enough for Social Security benefits. So for 2 years, I went without insurance. My body took a big hit, and I unfortunately have a lot of lung damage.
So we started searching, talking to other families and talking to other people in the Duchenne space. And one name that kept coming up was UCLA.
The community there is very strong. You have the doctors that will call you on your phone, that respond to emails.
The first time that we actually had a glimmer of hope and light was when we met Stan Nelson, Dr. Nelson.
And then we met Dr. Shea, and it was a complete life changer.
He obviously comes from a place that he understands because his son has Duchenne as well.
Dr. Shea was the first person to finally sit down and tell me what SMA was. Immediately, he started talking about treatment options, and he explained it so much better, and we realized that we had a fighting chance here with our son.
We're very lucky to have received exposure to all the resources there, clinical trials and testing.
We were trying to also get a site that was on the cutting edge of trials and new therapies and new options.
There was a lot of things involved in the clinical trial, a lot of MRIs, muscle biopsies, countless blood tests, things like that.
They kept talking to me about how I was going to maybe do a clinical trial, my parents, and they said it's my decision if I want to do it or not. And I said yes, because I wanted to help other kids who were less fortunate as me.
There was nothing else out there. There was no other chance or hope, and this was the glimmer of light that we saw.
He got gene therapy, and we were the first at UCLA to get it outside of clinical trials. After a while, they were able to get the IV catheter in, and it was literally as simple as him napping in my arms for an hour, and he got his gene therapy transfusion. After that, we actually noticed immediate change. Within 2-3 days, he was kicking his little legs like in a shopping cart. And then we just have noticed great change, like in strength.
Ryan was one of the first patients that Dr. Nelson performed a needle biopsy. Ryan was up and out the door in an hour or so, and there was no side effects, and he was running and playing the next day. It's amazing compared to the alternative that exists today.
Really, the hope is for gene therapy to be the solution. My first one wasn't a successful one, but it doesn't mean that trying it again wouldn't render a more successful gene therapy.
We were actually trying at the time actively to have a second child. So once we found out he had Duchenne, we did stop temporarily trying to have another child. As we researched more, we found out about IVF. There can be testing done on the embryos, genetic testing, to see which of those embryos are carriers or have Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's very time consuming. It's emotionally and physically and financially draining. But in the end, we were successful in having another son without Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
His best interests were in mind of every doctor. And from Dr. Shea and Dr. Nelson, their mindset was very much about not just his future quality of life, but also about the quality of the experience as he goes through this.
Dr. Butte has always tried to find answers for everything. I always describe my relationship with my care providers at Dr. Butte and other doctors that I see at UCLA is kind of like a little tribe. When I have a question or if I'm not feeling well, he'll try to get to the bottom of it. Even like for my birthday this year, he got me some birthday donuts. And so, having a doctor that truly cares and is there and understanding it has been a world of difference. Very fortunate in terms of coming to UCLA and being under his care.
We have to say we're no longer just a number in the system. We are part of the family at UCLA, and the care that Ryan gets, Ryan actually enjoys going to it.
For Peyton to be still up and maneuverable and walking around and ambulatory at 15 is quite an achievement.
Dalton is absolutely in love with Dr. Shea. Every time we go down to LA, like once we pull into the parking garage, he knows where he is and he loves it. He loves to show off for Dr. Shea. Everyone there at UCLA absolutely just adores him, and Dalton never feels like a patient.
The biggest piece of advice is research. Do research. Internet is a very helpful tool. Learn all you can.
It's a good investment in a child's future to be as engaged as possible with both the medical professionals as well as the community.
Be patient, but also be persistent. Trust your gut. You have to be vigilant. Make sure that you do what is necessary to get the answers that you need for your family.
It's a long journey. It's a hard journey. I think as a primary caretaker, it's important just to take time for yourself.
Always ask questions. Never be afraid of it. It's always better to ask questions and have that better understanding. Have a good support team, whether it be your family, your friends, your relatives.
Don't do it alone, you know what I mean? Find a good team of doctors and a good team of friends and family and keep them close. You're going to need them through this experience. Don't ever stop spreading your story. Don't ever stop explaining how important these things are for your child. You're always going to have to fight for your kid. And this is just going to be a little bit harder of a fight, but you're going to find those people who help you out phenomenally.
This is Ava, our TDCK warrior.
Ava Brielle Cox.
You should never underestimate her. I mean, she's capable of a lot of things. And soon enough, she'll be running around and chasing me all over.
In the dance. Robot.
Wow. Those are inspiring stories, and I just what a beautiful ending to that video. Again, I want to thank all of these families for their bravery, for their hope, for their optimism, and for placing their trust in us and our community of doctors and sharing their stories with us, because our patients are our real heroes. Oh, that was really incredible. Okay, now it is my pleasure to introduce my dear friends and colleagues who are going to be participating on our expert panel and who have firsthand experience with the families in this video. And they're also involved with training the next generation of doctors here at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. And it is really critical for our trainees to really learn from the best and the brightest. So now I want to all of my faculty, if my faculty could turn their videos on. Okay, making sure everyone's there. There we go. What I'd like to do is I'm going to introduce each of our faculty members very briefly. Dr. Stan Nelson, who is a professor, and he's also a director of the California Center for Rare Diseases, and he's also co-director of the Center for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy here at UCLA. Dr. Manish Butte, who's an associate professor and also a division chief in pediatric immunology, allergy, and rheumatology. Dr. Julian Martinez, an associate professor and also co-director of the Caring program, which focuses on autism and also the pediatric cancer. He's also part of the Autism Intervention Network, and he is one of the leads of the Undiagnosed Disease Network. Dr. Deb Krakow, who is professor and she's chair of obstetrics and gynecology, and Dr. Krakow has an incredible knowledge in skeletal disorders, genetics, and she's one of my go-to people for just about everything. And Dr. Perry Shea, who was mentioned also in the video, who is a professor of neurology and pediatrics. So welcome to all of my colleagues. I know that our audience is going to be really excited to hear from you and about your approaches towards diagnosis and treatment for patients with rare diseases. My first question is for you, Dr. Nelson. Can you tell us a little bit more about how UCLA's innovative treatments have changed your patients' lives, including patients like Peyton in this video?
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you a little bit of perspective of a part of what we're doing in the rare disease space, which is really centered around Duchenne muscular dystrophy, as you heard in some of the patient stories. And thanks to Marco's mom and dad and Peyton's dad and Ryan's mom and dad for joining us. That was really sweet to hear their stories. But, you know, and as somebody mentioned, my own son has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And that led us to create the Center for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy about 13 years ago now. And one of the things that was missing was really a robust clinical trials platform that allowed us to move drugs forward. And we were very, very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Perry Shea, who's here, who's become one of the world's leading clinical trialists in rare diseases and in Duchenne. And this is how we move the needle forward. So we have, you know, all three of those patients who presented part of their stories have participated for years in clinical trials, and it's really an arduous process. But it's creating that process where we can diagnose people relatively quickly. So even in Duchenne, one of the most common rare diseases, it's 3 years between the time that parents suspect and clinicians diagnose Duchenne still. So we don't diagnose everything by newborn screening yet. For the average rare disease patient, you know, maybe some of the people who are watching, it's actually 6 years still from time of from sort of real parental concerns to diagnosis, and that's average. So there's many who wait, you know, many years longer than that. So we need to push how we do diagnosis better still, and we're working on that as a big, big team and putting various components of genomics and resources and how do we move that process forward. In the Duchenne space, in this 13 years, we have 4 different, actually 5 as of yesterday, new therapeutics that are FDA approved for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, lethal progressive muscular dystrophy across 3 different companies. And the world is looking different. We're on the cusp of gene therapy, and we'll be able to provide gene therapy to a much broader range of patients over time. So it's really getting these different components in place in different areas with deep expertise in those areas, not necessarily covering everything very shallowly, but covering real areas very deeply so that we know the disease well, we can diagnose it well, we can create clinical trials robustly, make solutions, and then offer those treatments to our patients over time. So that's an excellent, and I will just put a pitch out there. One of the things I do love about UCLA is the breadth of the type of research that goes on. So we have, in our various research programs, we have collaborations with mathematics department over the years. We've had collaborations with engineering departments and the Nanoscience Institute. So it's really quite broad, and everybody will tell a bit of a different set of stories because the set of resources that come to UCLA for each of us is a bit different, but it's been a profoundly rewarding place to build some of these components, and look forward to keep doing so.
Thanks so much, Stan. And you really speak to a really important point. One of the unique aspects of UCLA is that we have our health system on the same campus as our School of Medicine, which is on the same campus. We share the same footprint with our engineering colleagues, with our basic science researchers, dentistry, our Jules Stein, ophthalmology, and it really allows, it sort of allows us to build these multidisciplinary clinics where we can bring different disciplines together, whether they're in the medical sciences or whether we're also reaching out to our colleagues in computer science, engineering, and such. So it is something that's very unique about UCLA, and so appreciate your bringing that up. My next question is for Dr. Manish Butte, who was also referred to in the video. Angie loves her donuts, and many of us do too, Manish, just by the way. But Manish, can you elaborate a little bit about how UCLA has been committed to lifelong care, or that sort of lifespan approach to patients, like we saw with Angie? I mean, when all of a sudden, many of our patients with rare diseases, they find themselves aging out of the system, and then what happens? So if you could speak to that a little bit, it would be terrific.
It's an amazing thing to be working at a place that is more than just a children's hospital. So the disease that Angie was born with is called SCID, or severe combined immune deficiency. And when I was a fellow in training, years ago, all these babies were diagnosed when they showed up in the hospital 6 or 8 months of age, really sick and dying. And nowadays, thanks to newborn screening at UCLA, we've actually moved the age of diagnosis all the way back to the first few days of life. When we diagnose them here and make a genetic diagnosis here, we can actually refer them and work with our colleagues like Dr. Cohn, who was mentioned earlier, and other amazing doctors in pediatric hematology oncology to cure these patients with gene therapy and with bone marrow transplants by the time they're a few months old, long before they actually even get sick. And now these kids grow up, they become teenagers, they become adults, and we follow them here from babies all the way through to adulthood. Every one of these birthdays for these kids is actually a very special day. They get donuts, perhaps, or they celebrate in their own way. But we know that these patients really are remarkable, and that they can thrive after they get treatment for their immune diseases. And we have 40, 50, 60-year-olds in our clinic that I routinely see, even though I'm a pediatrician. But can I just tell you, like, one of the amazing cases we took care of recently was a 47-year-old in our clinic who was the second patient ever treated by a bone marrow transplant and cured 47 years back by Dr. Steam here at UCLA. So we have had a tradition of taking care of these babies and curing them for decades, before many people here were even born. I like seeing adults and children in clinic. I think the younger kids get to see the older kids in clinic. The older kids get to see the young adults. The young adults get to see the older adults. And that idea that you can actually make it, that you can have a high school and a job and a career. The idea that you can survive with these rare diseases is inspirational for the patients. It's also inspirational for us.
And I might just jump in with Manish's comments, is that many disease, we all, certainly for these older folks like me, grew up in a world where genetic diseases looked very different. And I think we're in an era where kids are living well past their 21st birthday, often with good degrees of health, but also in other instances, we're dramatically shifting the disease. It's still a disease. It still requires team care. It still requires a lot of effort. But we're the difference between a pediatric hospital and sort of a more general hospital means that we need to span that age range. And we have advocacy to do because there's diseases that we care for well in the pediatric period in California. So the California Children's Services, for instance, recognizes that we have these diseases that require coordination of care. But there's a separate program called Genetically Handicapped Persons Program, which bestows a special recognition on diseases that might indeed last lifelong, but not all of the diseases get that designation. So we have a sort of a disjunction, if you will, in how we're caring for these patients or how we're paying for medical care. And that creates really an obligation on us to be advocates for our patients within our 50 different medical enterprises in the United States. And that makes the rare disease world especially complex.
Absolutely. And navigating these services and understanding the resources that are available to you is, as a patient and as a family, is just daunting. And oftentimes we know that the diagnostic odyssey can last for decades. And I mean, it really, as we saw with Ava's family, it's really being part of a health system that also incorporates research and clinical trials is really important. And, I'd love to hear from Dr. Julian Martinez. Julian, can you talk about UCLA's role in being a clinical site for the Undiagnosed Disease Network? So as we're talking about this diagnostic odyssey, it really has been transformative what you and Dr. Nelson and others have done. And if you can talk a little bit about how UCLA really has revolutionized finding sort of coming up or identifying the causes for some of these previously undiagnosed diseases.
Yeah, the Undiagnosed Disease Network is a research study that is funded by the National Institutes of Health, whose purpose is to bring together clinical and research experts across the United States to solve challenging medical mysteries using very advanced genetic technologies. And through this study, the hope is to better help individual patients and families that are living with the burden of an undiagnosed disease, but also in the process to contribute to the understanding of how the human body works. The study is based at several universities across the country, and UCLA is one of those participating sites. The average patient that reaches out to the UDN has a complex medical history, has spent a long time trying to find an answer, and has exhausted most, if not all, the clinical diagnostic options at the time of application. Patients undergo a careful review of their health information and prior evaluations after they're referred by their physicians for acceptance into the program. As part of the study evaluations, UCLA brings together disease experts as well as a pioneering use of the genome sequencing paired with RNA sequencing to identify rare genetic causes for undiagnosed diseases. What this allows is it allows the UDN to provide a diagnosis to more than a third of participants to date. Those are people that otherwise would not have been able to achieve an end to their diagnostic odyssey otherwise. And during the process, the UDN tries to create a safe and accepting environment that allows the individual participant, like Ava's parents, to find their fit. And hopefully once that fit has been achieved, to find a medical home where you can pursue appropriate, precise medical care according to the diagnosis. And as Navia mentioned in her video, sometimes achieving that milestone becomes a sense of belonging to a new community that then provides additional support, not only medical, but also societal and emotional. And I think that has a significant impact as well as the diagnostic journey ends and a new journey begins of pursuing medical care specific to the identified diagnosis.
Thank you, Julian. I know that our UDN has really transformed the lives of many, and being able to have the UDN alongside the California Center for Rare Diseases, where we are looking at this is cutting edge work that we're doing, that you folks are doing, and also as you start thinking about for families are desperate. Oftentimes the UDN feels like the last resort, and so now that you folks are also working on clinical trials, I know Doctors Nelson and Shea, as the video highlighted, that now you have for many patients, as you said, the first part is now I understand. I understand what's causing what's underlying my child's diagnosis, and now it's step 2. So now what are we going to do about it? And that can affect even the whole family. And as we saw, there's the Ryan, Todd, and Angie in the video, they were talking about family planning. And so, I'd like to ask Dr. Krakow, can you talk about some of the genetic testing done at UCLA that helps families like Ryan, Todd, and Angie in the video?
I'd be honored to. To all of you, thank you. I obviously love UCLA, and just to be on this call, I'm here because I'm blessed. I'm blessed by my colleagues. I won't tell you how old I am, though I was a fellow and Stan Nelson was already faculty. But it really, it's all of you. Someone once told me that when you go to work, it can be a job or it can be work. And for me, it's the work. And I do prenatal diagnosis, and it affords me the opportunity to take care of families, I think, at the most vulnerable part of their lives, where there's just this great hope to have a healthy child, and confronting the issues of perhaps it not being exactly what you had planned for is extremely difficult. And I think all of us mourn sort of the loss of the hope, but want to provide people with new hope. I think one of the things that's been most meaningful for me to be here and transformative is the following. I have the opportunity to see patients where the fetus has something that's not right. And with our exome service run by Stan Nelson and Haim Lee, we've been able to discover or uncover what the problem was. And we've taken that information and have been, in the cases where it's going to recur, like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy or some of the new disorders that we've identified, have been able to directly use our reproductive endocrine doctors to perform in vitro fertilization. And it's really it's seamless ability to get an answer at the level of DNA and then turn around within a month and have that person in an IVF clinic where they're going to be able to start to transfer embryos in 3 to 4 months from the diagnosis. And I don't know any other place that can do that. And it's really all of us coming together. And so for all of you on the call, thank you. And to my colleagues, you make me smile. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. I think that's, I will actually just highlight Deb's story is that every diagnosis is critically important, and the beauty with which you can give the absolute specific molecular genetic diagnosis and clarity creates the tool for doing that IVF is really quite remarkable. And that's something born of modern genomics, which is fantastic to be seeing used in patients in real time.
And that really is very much due in large part to your vision and foresight, Stan. I know that.
Well, a team effort, really is a very broad team effort from clinicians who use and push this issue to a molecular pathology group that was willing and able and capable of, creating an exome sequencing pipeline. My vision for the future is an even more robust molecular diagnostic pipeline that really brings the tools that Julian was talking about into common mainstream practice for for diagnostics. We use it on the research side right now, but there's really no reason we shouldn't be using it in clinic other than health insurance doesn't pay for it very well. And that's, again, it's an advocacy issue. It's something that we need to adjust and bend to our will. So, you know,
we
and
have,
it will.
we have lots of advocates and people that can really help champion that cause. You know, we were talking with when Julian was talking about, Dr. Martinez talking about the UDN, this idea that, you know, now there are actual therapies available, and that we are actively involved in some of the clinical trials. I'd love to hear from you, Dr. Shea, about how gene therapy works, and if you could speak to what a remarkable effect it seems to have had on Dalton's life.
Yeah, so it's been an incredible experience. I think just when I was still in school, I mean, we were talking about gene therapy, and I think all the other panelists here can probably speak to the fact that it's, you know, when we see genetic diseases, that was, to some extent, that was the exciting holy grail. How are we going to be able to treat genetic diseases? What's the ultimate genetic therapy? And, you know, and so this has been a long time coming. I think I was fortunate enough to be in the field where one of the earliest, or one of the first gene therapies to be approved by the FDA was just approved a couple of years ago, and that was for spinal muscular atrophy. And again, this speaks to the you know, all the efforts that we've made to make precise genetic diagnoses, to know exactly what is the genetic defect in our patients. And that's been the effort that a lot of us here at UCLA in the Undiagnosed Disease Network have really been working towards. Spinal muscular atrophy is one of these diseases where we've been taking care of these patients, providing what we were able to say was optimal multidisciplinary care, providing the best supportive care. But what else could we do? And that was the question that was asked for many years. And this is a genetic disease where there's a defect in a specific gene. And the idea behind gene therapy was to be able to restore that gene, to provide the gene back to the patient. And one way to do that is to re-engineer viruses, so to speak. So using a viral capsid as a vehicle to deliver a copy of the gene back into the patient. So that's the idea behind gene therapy. In this particular case for spinal muscular atrophy, the gene is known as SMN1, and it's been packaged in this virus that's called AAV9. And it's a small little virus which has very little known effects on patients. At least it's not known to cause any diseases in patients. And we give enough of this to be able to restore the function of the SMN1 gene, which is to make a protein. And that protein actually helps to maintain the survival of the neurons that these patients are losing. Now, SMA patients some of them are devastatingly affected. You know, they may have a lot of weakness as soon as they're born. Dalton is sort of more in the intermediate category, still very much affected, but perhaps not noticeable until he was about a year of age. There are some patients that are even milder, and we would like to treat all patients, but certainly the patients who are most severely affected, we want to treat early. Dalton, we treated, he was about a year and a half when he got treated. And I think he's benefited tremendously from it. Of course, we sort of wish we might have been able to perhaps diagnose him earlier and treat him earlier. And that's actually, I think, we spoke a little bit earlier about newborn screening. Spinal muscular atrophy as a disease has now been added to the newborn screening panel in California and in many other states. And that's one of the ways that we can perhaps better the lives of all of our patients with these diseases. And eventually, with other diseases that we're working on, doing clinical trials, finding treatments for them, hopefully we'll be able to diagnose them earlier, perhaps be able to do newborn screening on them, and to be able to treat them early enough before they can even develop any symptoms.
That's terrific, Dr. Shea. Again, the work that you folks have done with respect to clinical trials has really been incredible. do you and Dr. Nelson want to talk a little bit more about your work with clinical trials and the importance and the need for ongoing clinical trials and for folks to actually be able to participate in these trials?
Yeah, I will. I mean, I'll chime in and then would love Dr. Shea's comments as well. But, I'm very thankful for, Dr. Shea's efforts and push on this, but also for the kind of the amazing leap of faith that our patients put in us to participate in these clinical trials. By definition, when we're doing a clinical trial, we think that there's sufficient evidence before we're starting to give something to humans, but we don't know it. We actually don't often truly know that it's safe. So there's a variety of things that we are doing. We're doing typically often with companies now pushing for these to become FDA-approved therapeutics. So we work through a process where we need to do a series of clinical trials, phase 1, 2, and often 3, although sometimes we never have to do the phase 3 clinical trial until after a drug's approved in this space. So, I will give you a small anecdote that the very first drug for Duchenne muscular dystrophy that got approved because of 12 patients, 11 of whom agreed to a final muscle biopsy. They ended up having 4 muscle biopsies, proving that exon skipping could demonstrate a small amount of dystrophin induction. So these, 4 young boys spent, an average of about 5 years by the time the final biopsy was being done, with no guarantee that it was necessarily helping them, even though we had really strong mouse data, really strong cell culture data. There's lots of reasons to be optimistic. But what pushed the FDA to approve this drug was a comment from many of the experts, including Dr. Shea and others at about 24 other sites, including leadership at the Center for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, and Dr. Carrie Michelli's leadership to organize the expert panel outside of the FDA to comment on why this data was reasonable to allow approval for Duchenne, right? A disease where you have no dystrophin causes Duchenne. And then if you can make some dystrophin, it's very reasonable that you're mitigating that disease if it's expressed at the right location. And that argument ultimately won over a many, many month-long battle and Snowmageddon that happened in January in Washington, D.C. during the AdCom. But it's going to be a battle for every one of these. Every rare disease is rare. We don't know the exact disease process. It's always a struggle to design these trials. It requires patience on the part of the patients to sort of participate, but also just in terms of getting those ducks right so that the drug is FDA approved at the end of the day. And it really requires a lot of sort of background effort to make it work. So I'm extremely pleased, at least in the Center for Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, that most of our patients can be on a clinical trial now. And it reminds me of my days as an oncologist years ago, where most of our kids with cancer were on a clinical trial because it was the right thing to do, and because that's how we make progress. And we should treat rare genetic diseases exactly the same way. It's just going to be more complex, right? I don't know, Perry, you want to chime in?
I'm happy to add a little. So I think, what I can say is that clinical trials are challenging. I think clinical trials in rare disease are particularly challenging. I think it's not just challenging for us. I think it's challenging for the patients. Rare diseases, we're not talking about common diseases where we can recruit thousands of patients into a clinical trial and get big numbers that the statisticians want to prove that a drug works. But we have to deal with small numbers because we're talking about a rare disease. And what that means is there's a lot of burden on the patients that are in these clinical trials. I have to say that I admire and I'm very inspired by our patients, by their willingness to participate in these clinical trials and do all the things that we ask them to do, because there is an incredible amount of burden. These companies that are running these clinical trials and these networks that run these clinical trials, they're trying to get every little bit of data that they can to be able to collect the amount of evidence that they need with the small number of patients that we have. And sometimes, we're talking about placebo-controlled studies, and we always have to have this talk where we tell our patients, this is ultimately, you have to think of this as an experiment. We're doing experiments, and And you have to understand that. And our patients, they sign up for it. They're like, we're ready. This is what we're here for. We want to advance the field. And those are inspirational things that I've seen from my patients. And I feel like this keeps me going in this field and doing these clinical trials.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and there'll be N-of-1 studies too, Clara, where indeed single therapeutic options are invoked. Manish, I think, even has some pretty good examples of that, where the inference from molecular studies lead to, that's repurposing, but it's still an N-of-1 study effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to tell the story if we have a second, Clara.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I think it's a perfect story.
Yeah, in rare immune disease, a lot of our patients don't have a treatment, and we actually have to repurpose drugs from other diseases sometimes based on the pathways and the molecules that are not working properly. But what Sam's referring to is a story where I was called to the pediatric ICU to help take care of a baby with an incredibly rare disorder. She had rashes, she had bruises, she had swelling, she had blistering skin. She was extraordinarily sick. Her blood pressure was going up and down. And one of her mothers actually confided to me that she wasn't sure she was going to make it to her first birthday. The disease is called systemic mastocytosis. Her mast cells were genetically going crazy. And we tried steroids and antihistamines and all kinds of other medicines to control her blood pressure, and they weren't enough. But once we made a genetic diagnosis, we were able to come up with an idea that to treat her with a drug that had never been used before in children, but I felt could properly slow down her mast cells based on the gene and the molecules and the pathways involved. So with the help of people in the IRB and the Technology Transfer Development Group, we went from an idea to an approved protocol, to an emergency IND filed with the FDA, to a signed contract with Novartis in 48 hours. Then a courier service picked up a freezer box of medicine in New Jersey and flew it to LA overnight and met me in the lobby of the hospital at 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And then an investigational pharmacist came in and calculated the dose of this experimental medicine that had never been used in children. And the nurses in the ICU and the doctors in the ICU started giving it a few hours later. And that was 2 years ago, and she's now thriving. It is a huge team effort to get N=1 treatments like this done here. You have to really, it's not just me, it takes a whole team of people, nurses and lawyers to sign contracts. All that has to be done with timeliness. When you see and hear about a very sick child with a very rare disease, and to say to myself and to all these other people around me, you have to drop everything and help this child now. We need to do this now. And for them to do that, and for us to get this medicine from New Jersey to California and into a patient in 3 days, I think just doesn't happen anywhere else. It's, I've had the pleasure of working in a lot of big children's hospitals across this country. I mean, it is a truly amazing thing when you could do N=1 treatments like this in a rare disease and see it happen. I know Perry's nodding. I think all of you are nodding. You've probably had experiences like this. It's just a really special time when you get to be a doctor and get to be part of that. It's just magical.
Thanks so much for sharing. These really are amazing doctor-patient stories, and I know many of you have your own stories as well. And it is that doctor-patient relationships that makes the difference here at UCLA, and we see it over and over again. I once again, we're going to move to the next section of the program, but a real special thank you to all the patients who gave their time and energy to share their stories with us. And our faculty here, they're going to be with us for our Q&A. So as a reminder, I've seen a lot of questions in the chat, and we will do our best to answer as many audience questions as possible in our Q&A section later in the program. So stay tuned. Now I want to turn the mic, the virtual mic over. So if our faculty can turn their cameras off. I'd like to introduce two very, very incredible folks. We're going to be focused now hearing about the advocacy and community engagement in the rare disease space. And as so many families have shared, and UCLA agrees, building this strong community is integral to thriving with rare diseases and being able to advocate for yourself, for your loved ones. And it can also be critical to finding the best care for your family, whether it's joining a Facebook page, whether it's finding another group of patients. Rare diseases are rare. And so for many people, just being able to find community is incredible. And also there's a lot of advocacy that's involved. People constantly have to be fighting and ensuring that you are the priority. So UCLA has been a node and a connector, and you saw in the first video, for our patients for decades. And many advocacy groups have grown out of the environment here. So we're incredibly committed to connecting patients and continuing this work. Our next two guests are advocates for rare diseases and have really unique experiences of their own to share. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Cheyenne Floyd, who's an MTV reality personality, and she's also the founder of Rage Regardless Rye. Her daughter was diagnosed here at UCLA by another one of our rare disease experts, Dr. Derek Wong, who specializes in metabolic disorders. I also want to introduce Earl Cole, who is, for those of you who are fans of Survivor, he was the Fiji winner of Survivor. He's also the founder of Perth's Kids Foundation and NORD's Rare Action Network. He's also a California State Ambassador. So Earl and Cheyenne, welcome and thank you so much for being with us today. I know that it's a real treat for all of those that are participating in this event to hear your stories. Earl, why don't you start us off?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your journey.
All right. Thank you very much, Clara, for that. And thank you for the panelists. That was very informative. And I appreciate this opportunity to share my story with the patients and caregivers that are out there. My journey starts a long time ago. I was diagnosed at the age of around 6 or 7 with a rare hip bone disease called Legg-Calvé-Perthes disease. Very obscure name. It's actually the names of the doctors that discovered it over 100 years ago. It is a form of osteonecrosis, sort of, where the hip bone loses blood supply. So it causes the ball and bone to actually die. So it's a very, very painful death of that bone. And it's a process a child has to go through where I had crutches, was in a wheelchair. I missed 2 years of school. It was a lot. And the diagnostic odyssey of that, it wasn't discovered that it was that particular rare disease until 2 years in. We went to various different doctors and no one could figure out why, I was in this pain. It was just me and my mom then. But, to shorten the story a little bit, so I went through that. I wasn't allowed to play sports or anything like that up until the age of like 13, 14. It was a very lonely journey. I feel like I was the only person on planet Earth that had this. It actually affects 1 out of every 21,000 kids. And for an African-American male like myself, it's 1 in 10 million. So I was one of the lucky chosen ones to actually take up on this. And so later in life, I end up, obviously going on a show like Survivor. It was actually painful for me, which I kept secret. So no one knew about that on the show. But I was fortunate enough to win, and I attribute that success to my childhood trauma of going through this disease, on how it made you more resilient, just a stronger person, just all these different things that lead up to me being the adult that I became. And my way of giving back, I used my prize money to actually start this foundation that has helped a lot of families worldwide to finally connect and meet other people, and children can meet other kids diagnosed with the same disease. And so we've grown globally, and it's been quite the journey and quite the experience. So happy to be a true advocate for this.
Wow, Earl, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Cheyenne, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your journey?
Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Cheyenne Floyd, and I am the founder of Rage Regardless Rye, which was created in 2018. I started RRR in honor of my daughter, Ryder Kay. She was diagnosed with VLCAD. VLCAD is a condition that prevents the body from converting certain fats into energy, particularly during times of fasting. So I had Ryder on April 7th, 2017. And Ryder was this beautiful baby. We did the newborn screening, and I found out the day that I actually brought her home, I got the call that the screening had come back and I needed to basically bring her back to the hospital. I was completely devastated. I was in shock. I honestly knew nothing about the newborn screening. I knew nothing about metabolic conditions. To be really honest, I don't even remember them doing the newborn screening when I was there. I think I was just so tired after beautiful 28 hours of labor that I don't even know when it happened. So to get this call, it was like my whole world just turned upside down. And then to learn about her genetic diagnosis, I didn't know where to begin. I met Dr. Derek Wong at UCLA, and he took us on as a patient. And he basically really helped to educate me and my family. I come with a really big support system. So every appointment, they were all there also. I'm pretty sure we probably overwhelmed him a few of our appointments, but he was so patient in helping us to navigate this new world that I knew nothing of. He allowed us to ask, I say us because I come with like a big tribe, but he allowed us to ask 1,000,001 questions. I'm sure I repeated myself a lot. He would really dive into our appointments with us, and I never got like, when you ask people questions and they kind of are trying to rush you through an appointment, it was never like that. They also gave us a big team. We have a nutritionist through UCLA, and they have all been amazing. I've been able to email, call, and once again ask all of my questions, and I've always felt like our family was truly taken care of. Over the past 3 years, Ryder has been admitted to UCLA 3 times. And each time as a mother, you never want your child in the hospital. It's one of like the scariest things, but honestly, UCLA has taken such good care of us each time. Their staff, all of the nurses have been so diligent and answering all of our questions. And they would bring in, their students. They were trying to teach about Ryder's rare genetic disease, and I really felt okay. It's not a place that you want to be, but you do want to feel welcomed and like someone truly cares about your child. And I've always felt like they handled us with the best care. I have been a MTV personality for the past 5+ years and have built a platform through that. And I made the conscious choice to share with the world about Ryder's condition. And it was at first my form of a personal therapy. I just wanted to tell anybody who would listen, I have this baby who has this condition that I don't know anything about. Do you guys know anything about it? And I was overwhelmed with the response from other families or individuals that also had metabolic conditions. So one day I went to, my family, and I said, I want to start a nonprofit. I want to raise more awareness. There's so many people out there, but not too many people out there that know about this, but it has its own world. And I want to tell people about the newborn screening. To me, it saved my daughter's life, knowing that she had this condition where you can't fast. So Ryder would have to be fed every 2 hours throughout the night for the first probably 8 months of her life. And if I didn't know that through the newborn screening and I let her sleep through the period of the nighttime, who would know where we would be today? But thank God for the newborn screening. So I'm a huge advocate for that now. And with starting the nonprofit, I really just wanted funding for families that were like myself, who just needed sometimes a little bit of somebody to talk to, extra help. And we put our heads together and we started a nonprofit. We knew nothing about the nonprofit world, but somehow we did it. Through this process, I've just learned that you have to be your child's advocate. You have to do your own research. You have to be that parent that asks a million questions. It is okay. UCLA has really made this process 100 times easier. I cannot say that enough. They have supported my family and I, and truly taken care of my daughter. So I am so grateful for my team there. We have realized that with the families that we have been able to help, that a lot of them were facing this world by themselves and didn't come from the same support that I did. So we were able to create a safe place for families that needed that mental support, financial support, and tips on how to become an advocate for their child. We currently have a crowdfunding fundraiser with UCLA, which I'm super excited about, to assist families facing financial burden when they're having to pay for parking tickets, because some of those families have to visit the hospital 3 or 4 times a week, and that burden of paying for that parking becomes a financial strain. So UCLA has allowed us to start crowdfunding through them. So, it's been an honor to work with you guys. It's been an honor to have my child in good hands. I'm honored to share my story today and just to continue shedding light on the conditions that are unseen.
Oh gosh, Cheyenne, thank you so much for sharing your story. And you could feel that your passion and, just your drive for your own child and your just support for other families going through what you've gone through. And, you did have a huge support system, and there are so many people out there that don't. So it's incredible work that you've done, and I applaud you for that. Both you and Earl mentioned newborn screening. Earl, can you speak a little bit more about this effort? Because we understand that NORD is advocating for newborn screening.
Yes, NORD continues to always advocate for newborn screening. I would like to say that the state of California did get an A on its report card for newborn screening, so that's a great thing. However, we did get a D for having a rare disease advisory council, which is something they are currently trying to put together, which is spearheaded by Senator Susan Eggman. So there's a lot to be done, obviously. For more information about the newborn screening that NORD is up to, just go to rarediseases.org. It's a constant fight. It's a lot involved. Unfortunately, with my particular disease, it has no identifiable genetic markers just yet. So it wouldn't have helped me, but it could help, it definitely helped someone like Cheyenne and others out there listening. So for sure, for more information, just go to NORD's website and you'll get a detailed report on everything that they're up to.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Earl. Really appreciate both of you being here and sharing your stories and really, again, giving folks a sense of hope and optimism for what can be and for the future. And thank you for being part of our UCLA family. We really appreciate that. Now we're moving on to the Q&A portion of the program, which I know that everyone's been really excited about. Please remember that while we may not be able to give specific medical advice about your specific condition, you can always submit your questions in the Q&A. We'll do our best to get to them. And at the end of the program, I'll give you some instructions in case you want to, you have questions that weren't answered and you'd like to submit them to the California Center for Rare Diseases. So right now, if all of our panelists and speakers, so that's Cheyenne and Earl, you stay on, can join me on screen for our Q&A, it would be terrific. Wonderful. Now, for our community at large, thank you for submitting questions in advance. We wanted to make sure that we were able to, we could appropriately triage the questions to the right to the right individuals here, and we had so many terrific questions that it was a little hard to prioritize, but we're going to do our best to address as many as time will permit. But we will give you information and encourage you to follow up with us afterwards, if, as I said earlier, if your question wasn't answered. So one topic that I just want to address head on and out of the gate, we've received a lot of questions about COVID vaccinations. Obviously, COVID is sort of has inhaled all of the oxygen, and not just in our news cycles, but it's across our health systems. So why don't we start there? I invite our faculty, Drs. Nelson and Shea, you can kick it off. Would you like to speak about the vaccine and some special considerations that the rare disease community should take?
Sure, I can give you some quick thoughts that are general. Is that we've been approached by patients of ours with muscular dystrophy and other muscle diseases. Should they be getting a shot, which is a gene, an RNA, into their muscle, and would they indeed be mounting an immune response since they have dramatically less muscle? And the answer to that is yes. The cells that are taking up the Pfizer and the Moderna are actually professional antigen presenting cells, and actually happen to be more abundant in most of our muscle diseases because there's less muscle there. So it's virtually certain they're still going to be taken up normally, mount an immune response. It might even be a more effective immune response potentially. So no reason not to do it because you've got a muscle disease or a nerve disease. They're obviously check with your physician, particularly in this rare disease space, to make sure that that's generally true. Many of our patients are on low-dose steroids or moderate-dose steroids, and that may suppress the ability to mount an immune response, but there's no evidence that it profoundly stops the immune response from being mounted. So we recommend that. We had one final sort of comment is, there is one that we actually use. So these first two vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, are actually using a bit of a gene therapy-like strategy, which has been discussed for how do you express new genes in muscle, for instance. So they're getting into the immune cells, not the muscle cells here, but the same sorts of strategies are relevant to actually how we might treat rare genetic diseases. So there is an interface here. And some of the vaccine strategies are actually using an AAV vector to deliver the gene for getting expression. And those ones actually would advise against using, particularly with a rare genetic disease that's possible to be being treated by an AAV, for the risk of mounting an immune response to the AAV, which could then make it more difficult to get that type of gene therapy heading into the future. So that's not approved yet. So none of the commercially approved anywhere in the world are that type yet.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Nelson. I don't know whether Dr. Shea or Dr. Butte would like to comment or add.
I was just going to add that one of the vaccines is an adenovirus, which is different from the AAV, and so that would be okay because we're not using adenovirus to treat genetic conditions. But the one that's an AAV, which is not one of the ones that's approved yet, at least, is the one we want to avoid.
Okay, great.
And maybe I can add one thing, that there are many patients like patients with NMOSD who are treated with immune suppressant medicines, or patients who were born genetically with compromised immunity because of an inborn error. They worry that they may not get a benefit from the vaccine. And I think that's still an open question, and it's something that we're actually studying here at UCLA. We're actually going to test patients before and after vaccine to see how their immune systems respond when they're born with these compromising immune states. I think it's still needs to be studied. At the same time, we're not worried about the safety issue here. We think even the patients with the most compromised immune systems are safe to receive the vaccine. The question is, will it help them? And that's one of the questions that we're trying to answer.
And kind of along similar lines, we also have a lot of patients who are on immunosuppressive treatments besides steroids, as Dr. Nelson has just mentioned, but like IVIG and other medications, which might also be appropriate for treatment. And so we don't really know. I would say we don't know how much the efficacy, the benefit that of these vaccines in these patients. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't vaccinate. We should go ahead and try, because that would be an appropriate thing to do.
Can I say something as well from a foundation point of view? We've spent a lot of time doing, I think, every month updates for patients, as well as what, as soon as we're learning it in real time about COVID, to keep people informed and answer really all the questions that they have. So I think that's something important for everybody with all of their different conditions and the different foundations, is to really address COVID and try to get some real-time, questions and answers.
And that really is it's a really important point that you bring up. And I'm glad that you did, because many disease, I know Autism Speaks, I know it sounds like your foundation, a lot of foundations really, they do have the expertise to really speak to each specific condition. So it is important to check back and make sure that you have, you get your questions answered for your particular condition.
Clara, can I riff
absolutely.
on that for a second here? Because we have this rare disease infrastructure, because we have the ability to sequence exomes and genomes, we actually early on in COVID took the lead among the 5 University of California's, UCSF, UC Irvine, UC Davis, UCLA, and collected actually all the genomes of the patients with COVID. So we have over 800 genomes now. This is thanks to Dr. Gashwin, who you heard earlier. Another faculty who's not here, Bogdan Pasnuik, and myself have started this group now, a large team of us who have been collecting the genomes of patients with severe COVID to try to understand, is there a rare disease underneath the susceptibility to COVID? And part of a large international consortium that I'm part of has actually discovered now a handful of genes that occur in a handful of patients now to explain why they have gotten very sick from COVID. And it's really all related to the immune system, of course, how well we can quickly respond to this virus and suppress it versus not letting it get out of control and letting our immune system get out of control and chase after this virus. That pattern, the tempo of the immune system's normal response, when it gets broken, actually turns out to be a lot of the underlying harm. So we're learning a lot about the immune system from these patients, and we're learning a lot about the disease from these patients. And again, it's a real strength to have a team of us here who know how to handle these hundreds of genomes and process them. It's been a real pleasure to work on COVID. That doesn't sound right, but
well, but yeah, point well taken. Dr. Nelson?
Yeah, and I might another sort of intersection of these things is actually Pfizer and Moderna using this approach applied for rare disease status when there were 11 patients in the US, and it was obvious for how to move forward. And they successfully made a vaccine in record time, which is very impressive. But they were seeking actually a commercial advantage through a rare disease program that was developed to allow us to develop rare disease drugs more quickly, which is obviously inappropriate, and they backed off from that pretty quickly. But there's some rather shocking intersections of these things, which in some ways it was a rare disease in January, right? Genomics solved this disease within a couple of weeks of the first patients being recognized in China. So this is really quite a dramatic scientific success story of genomics, and it remains a genomic success story for the things that Manish has mentioned.
Yeah, we think about 1 in 5 patients with severe COVID probably has an underlying genetic basis for it right now. We already, we have a while to go, but it stands right. It's been remarkable how fast we've been able to work.
And that really speaks to the promise of precision medicine and precision health, and why we here at the Institute are really, we bring folks like our faculty together to really, we were able to pivot in record time because of the infrastructure that we have created through the Institute for Precision Health. And at the end of the day, we know that there are some people that are asymptomatic, that don't really even know they're sick. We have some people that are really young and healthy going in, and they get COVID and don't make it. And then we have some older adults who are well into their 80s, with some of whom have underlying health conditions and get COVID, and they also, they weather the storm and come out okay. So how the promise of precision health is understanding, can your genetics help inform which patients are going to respond to the best treatments, and why. So it really is a community effort. And thank you to Dr. Butte and others who have really helped spearhead the work here at UCLA. I do have a question now. We received many questions about NMO. There's been huge interest in NMO. And so, Ms. Jackson, one of the common themes that we've been seeing is about a cure for NMO. And so we'd love to have your thoughts on when you think there will be a cure for NMO.
Well, I think as long as I'm living and breathing, there's going to be a cure. So I'm not letting anything deter me. And I know people get scared when they think about cure. They're like, well, there's ways in which we might be able to manage this, but no, we're going for cure. And I've engaged really with, I think, some of the brightest minds. UCLA, one of them, as I'm about to work with your team and Stan Nelson on a longitudinal immunomics study. So it's always about learning more in all the areas where, as I put together our scientific portfolio, really where it's going to be the most translational from bench to bedside. So it really is going to be effective and meaningful in patients' daily life. So working with Verily, which is an arm of Google, to learn more about in NMO specifically, about biomarkers that will help detect relapses. So really looking at all the things that, I look at with my daughter, that I deal with on a daily basis, that patients are looking at, is always going to be where I'm looking toward the cure. Intolerization. So I'm looking at the horizon. I'm hearing what's new and out there. And precision medicine to me is something, they talk about something new and exciting. To me, I've always thought about everything should be personalized and thinking about you. And I love that's what the Institute is doing, that it is so personalized. And I really want to just underscore, and I think I'm hearing from everybody on the panel, that even though rare, we feel at times like we're really cloaked under the darkness of rare and being alone and so few, it really is going to be what elucidates so much of the lightness of so many other things. And I think if you can continue to use your voices and ask the questions and try not to be afraid and just keep looking ahead, there's so much that can be done that people never thought could happen. And this last decade, I've seen such amazing advances. So I know that NMO will see that, experience it, and I'm hoping that that will be shared information that will go on to really make a difference for so many other conditions and people that are listening in today, to just persevere, because better times are ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I absolutely agree. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier, but I can't emphasize enough, is that at UCLA, we have real excellence. We've been focused on, some of the patient stories that we've heard about today, but really having a tremendous ophthalmology division. We have experts in cardiology, in metabolics, and neurology, musculoskeletal. We really have expertise that can support a multidisciplinary perspective. Dr. Butte's he's a tremendous leader in immunology, and really the folks that work within the California Center for Rare Diseases, they really bring all of the different expertise together, and that really does it's going to float all the boats. It's the sort of that multidisciplinary care model is what's going to really help us solve some of these really difficult cases.
Sarah, can I just say very quickly,
go ahead,
for people, since I know I won't be able to address so many questions people have, if they go to on their phone, there's an app that I created called Nmo Resources. And really, if you look at that, and I think it's also a great model for people that are on the line that are thinking about their specific condition and foundation, that tool is really helpful in terms of you can look at all the videos, the clinical trials, the advocacy groups, the experts you can connect to all around the world is on this app. And I really say, not only is it so helpful for NMO, but really look at it as a model toward what you could be doing for your foundation and your condition to really get the word out, because you have to educate so many. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's very, very helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. We've also gotten a lot of questions about Ehlers-Danlos. And I want to ask Dr. Krakow, do you know if there will be, this is a question from one of our participants, do you know if there will in the future be any way to cure Ehlers-Danlos?
Such a great question. I think that Ehlers-Danlos syndrome sort of mimics a lot of what our panelists have talked about in our patients and our families. It can be a diagnostic odyssey, and it's not likely to be one cause, that it's not going to be necessarily one gene. And one of the things I think that complicates Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is there is a level of autoimmunity that happens. So the autoimmune research will help people with Ehlers-Danlos, but the question is we don't really know, except for some very rare forms. Most of the forms of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that people have, where they really suffer from joints popping out and their hearts racing and difficulty and brain fog and bloating and some really debilitating things, likely aren't due to a single genetic mutation. But understanding the mechanism, sort of what Dr. Butte talked about, is, all of us trying to think and think and think what the underlying mechanism is, with the hope of then landing on something where then we can retool a previous used drug to target that pathway, is something that, I continue to work on, and admittedly kind of pounding my head against the wall, but I'm not giving up.
Thanks so much, Dr. Krakow. Really appreciate that. There's also a question, autism, which is where I've spent the majority of my career. And this question is for Dr. Martinez. Is there a direct correlation between neurofibromatosis and autism?
So that's a challenging question as well. We know that a number of genetic conditions in which there are effects on neurodevelopment, there can be manifestations that either resemble or are similar to autism, or that eventually rise to the diagnostic criteria of autism itself. And particularly for those conditions like neurofibromatosis, where sometimes the behavioral profile or the associated behavioral components can be a part of a spectrum. And particularly, it's difficult to reach a diagnosis of autism itself. Particularly in neurofibromatosis, where learning disabilities, memory, and ADHD are so rampant, it can be difficult to understand how those can sort of color the individual's behavior and whether that indeed would benefit from interventions that traditionally have helped patients with autism. But I think what it does, it brings up again the point of requiring multidisciplinary care for patients like neurofibromatosis. And at UCLA, we've established a neurofibromatosis clinic with the intent of bringing together that expertise that Clara Lyons-Sher was mentioning across all different organ systems, to ensure that patients with neurofibromatosis have access not only to essential care, but now that there are medications that are being used for patients that develop plexiform neurofibromas as part of the condition, that they can benefit from that treatment in the clinic as well. And what we're finding is by relying on our colleagues in ophthalmology, in behavioral psychiatry, in psychometry, in cancer, oncology, again, in basic research, and many people who are studying how the brain of individuals with neurofibromatosis is very similar to changes in patients with autism. Coupling all of that information together and offering it as part of a clinic visit that provides a personalized treatment plan for that individual, I think is where the value lies, in understanding the nuances about these correlations and these findings by bringing those experts that at UCLA all together work to provide the best care. So we hope that as medical homes like the Neurofibromatosis Clinic, like the Care and Research in Neurogenetics Clinic, like the Cancer Predisposition Clinic, like many of those that cater to patients that have rare genetic conditions, continue to thrive at UCLA and expand as models of care across the United States, that this becomes sort of the next level of care that sets the standard for the quality of care that patients should receive as these new technologies for diagnosis and treatment emerge. So we're hopeful that this continues to be part of the drive that the Institute for Precision Health has taken on to provide outstanding medical care for patients with rare genetic conditions, whether it's neurofibromatosis or autism.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez, for that very, very thoughtful response. A question came in. Earl, I hope you can sort of give us your perspective on this. Can you update us on how you foresee the current administration supporting the rare disease community? I know that you mentioned that there was, in our report card, we didn't do so well on the rare disease advisory board. But what can you speak to the current administration, and how do you feel they're going to support the community with research or research and treatment? Earl, you're muted.
I clicked the button, sorry. I think they're going to do a lot more than they did in the past. I think COVID opened the eyes of a lot of people. For you got a chance to, we always say you got a chance to experience what it might be like to have a rare disease, where the isolation and the uncertainty. But we were fortunate to have an advocate like Senator Susan Eggman that's going to really be pushing this bill forward to have this rare disease advisory council. It's strange that California, as large as it is, has never had such a thing, where you can have the community of different hospitals and the advocates and doctors and physicians all coming together to collectively talk about rare disease and how to best fight it and incorporate more newborn screenings, dealing with Medicaid, paying for certain things. I mean, it's a lot that they're going to be working on. So I look forward to 2022 looking a lot better for rare disease moving forward. So just fingers crossed that these bills pass. That's one of the main things. And it would be great to have UCLA Health be a part of this, the whole Rare Disease Advisory Council. I think UCLA is doing some great work, and would love to have that voice amongst all the others in California.
Thank you so much, Earl.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your perspective on that.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Clara, I would just comment as well that Every Life Foundation, which is actually born from a former UCLA physician and BioMarin executive and friend, they're doing interesting work, sort of indicating what the compounded costs of rare genetic diseases are on our society. And they just released, I think it was just yesterday, it's not the full paper, but sort of the 30,000-foot view, is the cost to rare genetic diseases is $1 trillion in 2019. And about 60% of that is not, and I think it's underestimated just from my own luck, because 2 billion of the 1 trillion is due to personal care assistance. And certainly in our own Duchenne, SMA, severe physical disability or intellectual disability world, it's far, far in excess of that for what you have to do as a parent to care for your child at home in a meaningful and compassionate and appropriate way. So I don't even think we have the full numbers for that, but 60% is non-medical. It's outside of inpatient, outpatient, driving to and from the hospitals. And these are burdens that we place on people. I think I agree with Earl that when we have these discussions about what's appropriate or not appropriate to charge people for COVID care, it's the same for rare disease community and actually for medical care in general. So I think we're moving to a different discussion in this, which I think is healthy for us.
And I would like to add one thing. There is a Project Baby Bear from Rady's Hospital in San Diego that is focused on newborn testing and giving Medi-Cal babies free healthcare for that are in the ICU, and that's something they've been working on. So if you're interested in that, if you're in the San Diego area, it's called Project Baby Bear, Rady's Hospital there. Just wanted to add that.
Thanks so much, Earl. Yes, that's Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. So I think that our last question is for Cheyenne. There are several folks that are interested in your Spark campaign. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so we have a campaign with Ucla Parking right now. It started honestly as an idea from our last appointment that we had with Dr. Derek Wong, and I asked, what can I do to help other families? And he said that some of his patients he was noticing wouldn't make all of their appointments if they had to come in regularly during the week because of lack of financial support to be able to pay for parking. So I asked him, who do I email to start? And he gave me a list of emails, and it was really easy working with UCLA. I think at first I thought it was going to be overwhelming because you guys are such a huge institution and who's going to respond to me, but it worked out very well. And we are now live with our Spark campaign to raise the funding. And the cool thing is you can go through my platform or my nonprofit, so rageregardlessry.org, and the fund goes straight to UCLA. It's also on UCLA's Spark campaign page. And it's been, a good opportunity to be able to work with you guys, and really, really easy to work with you guys.
That's terrific.
I want to get in on that Spark campaign for my own foundation. So yeah, so I'll be watching, Cheyenne. I'll be calling you about that.
I'll send you the right email, the right people to email.
Yeah, great.
Well, I want to, first of all, we're at time. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I want to thank all of you. We are just so grateful that you came and you joined. To our faculty and our speakers and our panelists, thank you for sharing your insights with us and sharing your stories with us. We're going to be following up with an email to provide some resources for you to get specific questions answered. I will mention the CCRD, the California Center for Rare Diseases. Their email address is ccrd@mednet.ucla.edu, and you can go to our website and just click on that. But we really appreciate all of the audience questions. I want to thank all of the organizers of this event and those individuals that have been answering questions in real time, whether it's faculty or our panelists. And again, just really a terrific event. Thank you for making it all a success. I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and take very good care. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks.